What's good in the hood, YouTube? This is Crazy Samurai 71 here, bringing you another video. Today I'm bringing a video on Power Rangers Hyperforce Episode 5. Yeah, we're 5 episodes in already, which means we're about 20% through the season, which sounds crazy. It sounds like we've actually got a bunch already out, and we have. But as far as things go, this episode is very cool. We finally get our Zords. People have been asking for quite a few episodes now. Where are the Zords? Where are the Zords? It's 5 episodes in now. We should see the Zords by now. This episode, we do get them. We also have it where the Rangers do travel to a different time period. We'll get into that, and I'll explain which time period it is later on in this episode. But it's very exciting, very good to finally know that they are moving on. They're moving forward. They're into another time period finally, so that's great. So as far as things go from there, we end up seeing that this episode begins with the Rangers on the ship. They're trying to repair it because that's the big focus initially. They want to get the ship fixed. They want to be able to travel through time. They want to be able to teleport more easily. They want to be able to move around in a much better way. So initially what happens is we have it where Vesper and Chloe work together, and at the same time Eddie, Jack, and Marv work together on another part of the ship. As far as Vesper and Chloe go, they actually have a moment where they discuss things and how, they're really, overall Chloe's really scared about the current situation because she's worried about how the ship is going to hold up and how the ship is just working in general, because she doesn't feel like everything that's going on is really working out, and she just isn't comfortable in the current situation. But at the same time, Vesper, as we know, has a very difficult time understanding how people act. She is a little bit more of a complex character that doesn't get along with people in the same way that we would just get along with each other or whoever it is. So that's something that's brought up, and it's an interesting conversation that's very serious and done really well. Additionally, we have it where Jack, Eddie, and Marv are talking to each other, and one of the things that's brought up that's actually very important is that I believe it was Marv who mentions it, how, or it was either Marv or Jack, I'm forgetting right now, but there was a point that was mentioned about how one of them noticed that, I think it was Marv, Marv noticed that there was yellow Ranger energy pouring through the Aisha Zord when they went on it, and so they were thinking that maybe they could use their Ranger energy to power up the ship. And the thing is that Eddie's the tech guy other than Vesper, and so they mention it to Eddie, and he says it might be something to look into, and so that leads to Eddie having to communicate with Vesper and seeing if the two of them can work together to get the ship operating so that it can be powered by the Rangers' power. So that is something that's kind of interesting to note, that they want to get that going. So additionally, from there, what happens is that eventually we have it where there's a monster attack that occurs. This monster attack is from a monster known as Shibarai, which is a combination of like a dog and some sort of it's like this samurai dog that has double blades and has certain samurai-like attributes to it, and it's just an interesting character. So that's like the big monster for the episode as a whole. We have it where this monster fights the Rangers. Chloe at one point has to save a kid and find the kid's parents. So that's interesting. It's a different kid than the past ones we've seen before, but still interesting as a whole. At the same time, the other Rangers have to fight Shibarai, which, one thing I will say, which is great, is that as far as battles go to this episode, this is probably one of the better episodes when it comes to battles. Not just because of it's good and everything. I mean, in the sense is that, there's enough going on that it doesn't feel boring. A lot of times when it comes to a lot of these battles, they tend to drag on a little too much and they don't feel as exciting. There's not enough going on, or they don't know how to make it feel exciting for long enough. Over time, they've gotten a lot better at that, where, things don't feel as short and boring. A lot of times they're managing to keep it so that it's still long, but it's entertaining. There's interesting stuff going on. There's enough going on that it doesn't feel like this is taking it forever. This isn't the longest thing in the world, which is what a lot of the first couple of episodes were like, where it felt slow. It felt like they were still trying to get used to the show themselves as far as actors go. This episode was like a really great episode for where, the battles were long, but it didn't feel long because there was enough going on, and they knew how to keep it interesting and keep it so that, okay, I'm actually, wanting to get more and more interested in what's going on here. Like, oh, I'm liking this. This was one of the first episodes that I would say, like, I truly felt that. Last episode, I definitely felt that, but this one, I felt that even more so. It's just them getting more and more comfortable with their characters, I can tell. But I love that, and that's really important to see that, there's a sense of comfort, a sense of strength, and that they're getting better and better and more clear on what they need to do as characters and as actors for these roles, which is really cool. So anyway, they fight Shiburai. Shiburai is an interesting character. We also have it where Lord Zed is a past villain that we see is introduced into the show. They actually have it where they do the whole entire introduction of when, we see the Moon Palace and he sits in his throne, and then it turns around and then he looks down at Earth and everything through his metal visor piece. It's just, they do, like, when Malika mentions all that, she did it so well. Malika, if you don't know, is the game master. So, like, when she does all that, she describes it to a T pretty much. I mean, she gives you a pretty accurate description of what exactly happens when, he does all that. And eventually he throws down his putties, which is cool. So that's neat as well. So he uses the Z putties, which is nice. So yeah, aim for the Z, of course. So, the Rangers fight Shiburai and the putties, and eventually, after everything is said and done, they're fighting, and at one point or another, we have it where the Rangers have to struggle with Shiburai, who, after countless battling, is actually turned big, and at that point, they don't have much to do. They don't have many ways to fight Shiburai, and what they end up doing is eventually, Eddie and Vesper manage to get the machine working so that they can actually send a message to the future, to the year 3016, hoping to communicate with Jen Scott or someone else. And as far as things go, they end up finally getting the machine to work, and when they do that, shortly after, an automatic message comes back, and it is from Abigail. Abigail, you may remember, was from the first episode. She was one of their classmates, and she sends them this message, like, saying that, oh, you should be really happy for what you're doing. It's great that you're Rangers. You're doing an awesome job, and we've been working on fixing your ship and helping you out, and we have something coming along the way. So one of the things that's brought up is they end up getting new parts, but they also get Zords. So that's really cool. So we actually get to see each of the Rangers' Zords, and that's what they use to actually, to actually fight Shiburai. So we end up seeing them use their Zords that do different attacks, and each of the Zords are really interesting as a whole. One other thing that's really cool is that, now there's a general progression when it comes to the dice, because it's like, when they're civilians, it's 1 die. When they're Rangers, it's 2 die. When they're in their Zords, it's 3 die. Now, I don't know if when they're in their Megazords, if it's 4, or I'm pretty sure it's actually just a team situation where each one of them rolls 1, but it could be that it's 4. I don't know. Anyway, the Zords themselves, really, really cool. Like each one of the Zords, they have great designs. We have each one of them having unique traits. Some have like weapons or attachments or tails that are specifically meant for a certain purpose. Like I think that the serpent's tail has like a drill at the end of it, and I think like the lion has like a ball and chain kind of situation, which is kind of cool. Each of them have something unique that makes them stand out, and I appreciate that. The designs are really neat as a whole. Again, we still haven't seen the Megazord yet. That was something that we were kind of hoping to see, but we'll probably see that next episode, because it does happen a lot of times where they'll introduce Zords one episode, and then the next episode they'll actually make the Megazord. Sometimes it happens all in one episode, sometimes it doesn't. It definitely has happened where one episode they introduced the Zords, next episode they introduced the Megazord. That's what's going to happen probably. So keep that in mind, that like most likely we'll finally get to see what the Megazord looks like next episode. I'm hoping that they do a full-on animation and like do a really nice look of it, because supposedly the Zords that we saw the images of are really just concept art for them. Now, does that mean that like we'll get better, more official images at some point? I would imagine so. I just don't know yet. I would hope that we would get more official images for that, and same with the Megazord. I would definitely hope that we'd get something more official. I don't know anything yet. I would hope so, but that's something to note. Anyway, following all this, the Rangers do have to fight Shiburai. They do a lot of battle with it, and eventually they do defeat it. But then, at one point or another, when they're really happy that they've done well, suddenly the Alliance leadership goes from being cloaked to being uncloaked. That's something that's really interesting, and the Alliance leader ends up traveling to another time period. So at that point, the Rangers also have to deal with the fact that the ship is not in the best shape, and also their ship is pretty damaged, and they have to figure out what they can do. But they have new parts, so the Rangers do end up trying to repair the ship and making it so that they can travel. And one of the things that also helps a lot is that the Rangers dock their Zords inside of the ship. So that actually powers up the ship so that they, since they're like pouring in their Zord powers, the Ranger powers into the Zords, and the Zords pour into the ship. But the thing is that it's still not the best situation, and when they travel through time, they have it where the Alliance leader's ship actually is draining their Ranger energy. Not the Ranger energy, but just the ship energy. And what this eventually leads to is Alpha 55 losing power and basically becoming, something that, becoming a being that can't work. Like, he can't do much at all, and he basically loses all power and connectivity. So they have to rebuild him. Now, that's something that we don't actually see him being rebuilt yet, but I'm sure we'd see him rebuilt, in a couple episodes or so. We just don't know anything yet. Or they may do a new model, like they might do Alpha 56. You never know. But anyway, they have to deal with that. They have to also shut off their power so that they don't get their power drained too much. And, just a lot of different tension and struggles happen. We have it also where, the Alliance leader does talk to Scorpina and Volcanos at one point, which is cool. But then following all this, we do travel through time, which is very cool. Everyone was wondering, they're describing it as this place that like doesn't seem part of Earth, seems kind of distant and very industrial and dark, and not something that's supposed to be very nice looking. And then later on, they end up meeting some people that are supposedly very poor, that look not super healthy, and are part of some tribe or some group or whatever. And then they say that they're heading to Koronef, which basically tells everyone right away that the assumption that a lot of people were having, which was RPM. Yes, it was RPM. That's the series that we're at now. So that's interesting. That also has to do a lot with the fact that they're not just doing that because that's where they wanted to go. It's also because they're asking fans, what season do you want them to go to? And I'm sure it's a combined factor. It's like what's popular and also what are people asking for. And I'm sure a lot of people were asking for RPM. So that's something to note, of course. So as far as things go, yes, they end up traveling to Koronef. They have to also make sure that they can bring their ship, which the ship is actually in pretty poor shape, but at the same time the Zords are in good shape. So there's some sort of difficulty there where like they have to leave it over and somehow go to Koronef and see if they can figure out things. We don't know all the details yet. It's still kind of early. I mean, all we know is that they're heading to Koronef now, so that's interesting with these people from this tribe that seem to respect Vesper and the Rangers and everyone. The reason why I mentioned Vesper is because there's this interesting moment where she refers to herself as like a princess or something. It's interesting. Anyway, or actually, I think that she refers to herself as a god. The point is that she makes herself out to be like this holy being or whatever. But as a whole, this episode was really good. Following all this, we also had the Fireside chat, which was really cool because we have Melissa. Melissa, if you don't know, is actually one of the people that's like pretty important in Saban brands. So she's actually pretty big when it comes to Power Rangers, and she's significant in the company. So it was kind of cool seeing her talk with Andre and Malika, and I think there was one other person. I'm not sure if I'm right about that, but it was cool to see those three talk to each other. Andre was just really interesting. Andre, who plays, Eddie, was really interesting to see talk to the two of them. And Melissa was just interesting because, like, she mentioned how people have been asking about, are we going to get Power Rangers Hyperforce product? And basically, what she explained was that we want to make it. We need people like us fans to support it. If there's enough support, if there's enough interest in it, where they can see that it's worth making actual product for it, they will absolutely create it. But it's not. But they have to have enough interest to know that, like, if they start selling this, there's going to be a big enough audience that's going to buy it. If you just suddenly place it on shelves and no one knows about it, and they just look at it and say, like, what is this? Why should I even care? Then you're going to kind of have to deal with that hard situation of, like, how are you going to get an audience? So they're smart. They're smart with what they're doing. It's just interesting to note that. I don't know whether or not that means they'll ever get it or if we won't get it. I hope we do. I would love it if we got some Power Rangers Hyperforce product. I would love to see some basic figures. I would love to see the morphers made. I would love to see if they do a Megazord. That'd be cool. If they could have each of the Zords, I mean, that would be really cool as well. Just because all this stuff is original concepts, and like anything from this, like, you'd want to buy up just because it doesn't exist anywhere else. Like, Japan doesn't have this. This is America. Like, that's pretty amazing. So, like, if they do this, like, that's original content. And you could say the same thing about the movie, but, like, this is even more so because this is like an original idea that's traveling through different time periods, doing all sorts of original stuff. That's pretty cool. So yeah, I would love it if we can get some product out of this show. That would be beyond exciting. That would make me so happy. I don't know where they would sell it. Maybe at some comic shops, just because that's really where fan culture is strong, I would imagine, just because toy stores are a little bit more iffy. But I don't know. Maybe they do it. It honestly depends on if there's enough audience. Again, all of us need to support it in order for this to actually become a real thing. But I'd love to hear your guys' opinions. Did you guys enjoy this episode? I personally did a lot. I found it really, really good. I'm really happy that we got these Zords. Megazord should be coming soon. We also finally are in Cornif, which is really cool. So RPM is a thing now. As far as what that means, obviously now since they went from season 2 to season 17, I believe it. No, was it 17? Yeah, 17. What that means is obviously they'll probably jump back and forth. So what that could mean is next they'll go to, I mean, it doesn't matter. It could be any season. It could be in space. It could be Time Force. It could be Ninja Storm. It could be Wild Force. It doesn't matter. Or it could be Dino Charge. I don't know. But the point is that there's no limitation there. The fact that they jump so far ahead really gives you a sense that, like, they're willing to jump that far ahead that early, which means that, they could just as easily jump right back to, say, Zeo if they wanted to. As far as who I expect to be the actor that may show up, a lot of people are hoping for Milo Cawthorn. I forgot to mention that as well. That would be cool. Ari Bolin will also be really neat to see. He played the Blue Ranger. Milo Cawthorn played Ziggy. If you're wondering who Milo is, yeah, he played Ziggy. A lot of people love Ziggy. He's probably one of the most popular actors from that season. A lot of people also have said Scott. Scott would be very cool. Eka Darville. He's a little bit harder. Same with Summer, who's played by Rose McIver. Mainly because Eka Darville is known for his work on a lot of the recent Marvel. He's known for being in Marvel's Defenders and also in Marvel's Jessica Jones. And as far as Rose McIver, who plays Summer, she is actually pretty significant because she's on a number of major shows. Like I'm trying to I'm trying to think of what it is that she's on, but she's been on a bunch of recent shows that are very, very popular and are like prime time shows that make it hard for her to be a possible person to show up. But I would definitely say that like Ari would be cool, and I think Milo would be cool. It's just really hard in general because a lot of these actors do not live anywhere near where they are shooting this. Like most of these actors do live in New Zealand, and so that's really hard when they do this because it's like who can come or who is in the area, you know. I don't know if Milo Cawthorn's in the area as of late. He might be. He doesn't do many conventions as of late. He's done them before. The reason why I even mention conventions is because usually that's where like that gives you an indication that like they're in the area, they're doing stuff, especially the ones that, you know, are originally from a certain area that isn't in the United States. Like, you know, a lot of the more recent seasons have actors that are from Australia. I mean, most of the actors from Ninja Storm onward, that's the situation. So, you know, you have to keep that in mind. While, you know, Wild Force back, you're talking about actors that primarily were born or lived for a good portion of their lives in the United States. So keep it in mind. I love to hear your opinions, though. What do you guys think of this episode? Please remember to like, comment, subscribe, tell me what you guys think, and I'll see you guys next episode. So until then, guys, I'm Crazy Samurai 21, and goodbye, guys.